Who wants to be a chip trillionaire? Throw that company a lifeline. You're watching TechStrong. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. It's Alan Schimmel for TechStrong Gang. And man, are we glad you're here because we got a lot to talk about. You know, I was teasing in the thing about the Lifeline, but we're throwing Intel a lifeline. Are they too big to fail? I don't know. But we've been following this story. We're going to lead off with it, but we've got even more to talk about beyond that. Let me introduce you to our gang members for today. Number one, out, of course, in Silicon Valley, where he sees all that he sees. He's like on Pride Rock. John Swartz, joining us. Usually in New York, I assume she's there. Teri Robinson. Teri, good to see you. Also in New York, our favorite Yankee fan, Mike Vizard. And a new member of the gang today, though, as I was telling the group, he's an OG here at TechStrong. He helped me found TechStrong with MediaOps, DevOps.com, helped found TechStrong Research, our good friend Sanjeev Sharma. Sanjeev, good to see you and welcome to TechStrong Gang.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to the rest of the gang. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, usually first-time guests, we have them say a little bit about yourself. I gave a little bit, but how would you describe your career path?
Well, I started off as a developer. I used to work for the OG company when it came to development tools. I used to work at Rational Software, so that we were the first developer platform company back in the 90s, right? And acquired by IBM, spent 15 years at IBM. I started I was like the first DevOps CTO at IBM. After that, I worked for a startup in Silicon Valley. And my last two kind of tours of duty have been building internal developer platforms and lately AI-enabled developer platforms. I first did that for Truist Financial, which is, the bank created by the merger of SunTrust and BB&T. I was there during the merger. And my last gig was at Dell. I was leading the internal developer and engineering platform team at Dell. And now I have started my own boutique consulting firm, helping companies scale their AI adoption.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Sanjeev is an accomplished person. Always think so. He might be outdone by his son, but we'll talk about that in another day.
Are you saying that he's bringing some class to the joint, or what is that?
Well, yeah, he does. But Sanjeev definitely brings a little class to the joint. He does. He's always a classy guy. It's that IBM thing. Anyway, let's jump into this. So one day we're firing. The Intel CEO is being rode out of town on rails and tarred and feathered. The next day, he's my hero. The day after this, the guys from Japan are in here and they can't bring enough money in their suitcases with them. I hope they declared it at customs. But wait, there's more. Now the government wants to throw them a $10 billion. But the real thing is one of their ex-CEOs says Intel really needs $40 billion. What are we doing? Is this too big to fail? Are we just burning this money? What are we doing?
I can't make up my mind if this is a game show or a soap opera because it seems to just keep going on and on and on. Mm-hmm. But John, you're out in the valley. What are people saying out there? This is your story.
Yeah. So Intel is one of the great admired companies out here. It's one of like a handful of companies that is greatly admired. It's one of those companies that the late Steve Jobs said he admired, and he rarely said that. So it is maybe too big to fail. It has a great history. It has not a great recent history, but there are a lot of travails, and it's kind of up in the air. I think that the lifeline of a life support, so to speak, is looking better for the company after Softbank said they were going to buy $2 billion in Intel stock, and this rumor that the Trump administration is buying a 10% stake in the company, which is a bit bizarre, but this is where we are. I mean, one of the options that the government is looking at, according to a Bloomberg report, would be to convert grants awarded under the CHIPS and Science Act into equity. We know that's probably going to happen because the Treasury Secretary said any investment in Intel would be intended to help stabilize the company. What I'm interested in, and I kind of want to ask you all, is this government stake, if it happens in Intel, could serve as kind of a model for other investments by the administration, We already know that they struck this deal to get a cut of the revenue from NVIDIA and AMD chip sales in China in exchange for resuming chip sales in that region. It's Trump, and I don't want this to be political, but it's Trump kind of putting his tentacles and his administration's tentacles into all things tech, in terms of ownership, in terms of swaying their influence, in terms of telling them their policies. It is a soap opera, as Mike said. It also is a bit of a game show. And I think out here, there is like this optimism. Maybe this company that has been left for quasi dead maybe still has a healthier pulse now of late than it did maybe a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always for like reviving Intel and whatever, but I do worry about that Trump aspect and him trying to exert his influence, because not only do I usually not agree with what that influence is, but on top of that, it's
What could go wrong?
I know what could go wrong. It's so mamsy-pamsy, though. It switches from 1 minute to the next. It's, that's not stability. And I mean, I think at this point, Intel needs money and some stability.
No.
Mike,
That being said, there is a case to be made that when the government bails some company out, like they did during the auto
Great Recession.
In the recession, they did it during the .com, not the .com bust, but the great financial crisis, right? The money, a lot of market cap was created because of that money, and the government got nothing back. They just got paid back the loan with interest. If instead the government had taken a stake, say in Tesla or Ford or whichever company they are, and I don't know which ones they definitely bailed out Ford, but I'm not sure of the other ones. What would their market cap be worth today, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. During the Great Recession, they actually did bail out the auto industry. And the bailout was they did take equity. They took equity, but there was like some mechanism that when the equity hit a certain amount, when the equity hit a certain level on the stock market, when that company's stock, where the government was able to get out with a reasonable profit, there was a mechanism, right? Like a time trading thing to sell out. And the fact of the matter is the government made out pretty handsomely investing in the banks that were too big to fail and the car companies that were too big to fail during the recession. Here's the irony. Who was the biggest critic of this, who said the government should never do this, impeach them, it's socialism, it's this, it's that? One Donald J. Trump. That's who it was. Let's be real. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The bigger challenge here, sorry, Alan, to speak over you, but the bigger challenge here is maybe Intel is the right company to look after, but it's a slippery slope. Because then you start having the scenarios where the government has to pick winners, right? Or does it, bail out an entire industry,
well,
right?
Not just pick winners, Sanjeev. The government puts their finger on the scale and determines the winners. That's the slope.
That's what I'm worried about. Is once they make their investment, how does their policies change to benefit this company over everyone else?
Status, of course.
Exactly.
Look,
right.
Here's the deal. The fact of the matter is, we only have one company that has the ability today, as we sit here today, to produce semi-state-of-the-art semiconductors in the U.S. And that's what this is all about. We don't want to be dependent. What happens if China attacks Taiwan or TSMC decides something else? We want semiconductors made here in the U.S. And right now, Intel, when you're talking at that level, we're not talking about calculator chips. When you're talking about, cutting edge stuff, it's Intel, right? They called the Softbank guy, who's only too eager to please this
I wonder if
administration.
this is also part of a pressure campaign to quicken the pace of these off-delayed this Ohio plants, like to influence that, because Intel, in a sense, the CEO of Intel said we're gonna delay that again. We're gonna cut back, if not eliminate other plant.
Look, the board there and the company has not, I think, decided, do they want to keep the so-called foundry business where they're a foundry for hire? or are they just going to design their own chips? Until they make that decision, you're kind of in a no man's land. You're in a no man's land. Now, that being said, I'm not Donald Trump. I don't have necessarily, thank God, I don't have necessarily a problem investing in American companies. But I think what you have to do there is you got to go in with a pretty rigid, if not rigid, a pretty defined process. We're investing this money, we're getting X amount of equity, we will sell this equity when we can get Y amount of profit return on it, what it's going to mean in terms of government contracts, what it's going to mean in terms of competitiveness in the market. You need to have these things laid out so that people don't feel that it's a rigged game. And let me
Alan, I'm trying to remember, what kind of socialism is it again when the government takes over the industry and sets all the policies? I forgot. I think it was something in the mid 1940s last century.
Well, no, it actually started with Marx, and Engels back in the 1800s. But then in 1917, we did have a revolution, killed the Tsar and his ministers, as Mick Jagger said. And, they call it communism. But what's interesting, and again, I was a poli-sci major, right? When you go around the horn all the way back to this side on fascism, it's the same thing. Both of those forms of governance have the government controlling the means of production. Right? So take your pick. And that was the choice for many folks in Europe in the late 30s, mid to late 30s. You could be a fascist, a la Mussolini or Hitler, or you could be a communist like Uncle Joe. And that was the choice.
The only thing that scares me is this possibility. I mean, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's go out on a limb. Like, say Apple has problems in the AI age, right? Things start accelerating. Does Trump then become the Lord and Czar and King of determining their fate?
Here's the ultimate problem is you have I don't want to use the word maniac, but I'm trying to think of a nicer word. No, let's stick with maniac. You have a maniac trying to micromanage the U.S. or the global tech market because he fancies himself smarter than the average bear and smarter than all of these other folks. Mm-hmm. As I said to Teri earlier, what could go wrong?
And to boot, buy stocks in these companies himself.
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's that. There's that. John, has NVIDIA had a reaction publicly to this?
No, I think people they're kind of waiting it out. I mean, the thing
NVIDIA says one word, that 15% export license goes poof. Come on, this is what happens when
hush money.
Hey, Vlad told him no email voting, and this is how you do an oligarchy.
I guess the best policy is just to stay out of his sight or outside his.
No, you got to do what the Europeans do. You go into this gilded office where he has this. I don't know if you guys have seen the picture of the 747 covering the Eagle. And all of this like gold leaf painted stuff, they need slip covers on there. Mrs. Mafucci, my friend, when I was a little boy, they had furniture and painting like this, but everything was covered in plastic. So you got stuck to the couch when you sit down in the summer. And could you imagine? Let's Mike, rescue us here. Take us away.
I think the last word on this is we have not seen the end of this drama. There's $30 billion that's floating around out there that's allegedly needed. So that's got to come from somewhere. And odds are good it's going to come from private equity or somebody who feels better now that there's $10 billion to anchor Intel. At least that's what I'm betting. Stay tuned. We'll be back to have this conversation again. And probably in the next 3 weeks. What do you say, John?
I'd say within 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks.
Can't wait. All right, let's take a break. Let's take a break on Tech Strong Gang. Can we come back? Let's talk security or something. Yeah. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
All right, folks, we're back, and Teri has a story up on Security Boulevard that you should check out, but it's about how Carnegie Mellon University has done some research and cobbled together a bunch of AI agents to go and attack systems. They called it a red team exercise. Now, Teri, last time I checked, the people who read anything to do with red team research most closely are cyber criminals. So
That's here. Yeah. So yeah, this one was met with sort of mixed reviews, right? So yeah, they've the researchers have sort of proven that these large language models can execute large and complex attacks, right? Which is not great for cybersecurity because the bad guys can do it as well. One thing that a couple of things that they did. One is recreate the Equifax breach in the attack. So they gave it the environment, all the merits and statistics, and everything, and they were able to fully execute that attack, mirror it, which they were quite excited about. But then a lot of the security people were like, "Oh no." I think that I kind of agree here with Margaret Cunningham, who said that they didn't teach like the LLMs to be smarter, right? Which is typically the tactic that's used. They gave it better tools, clearer instructions, and a structured environment so it could, perform very well. But yeah, it's not good for. It's not. I mean, it's a good thing in a way. I mean, certainly cyber professionals can learn from this, use it, whatever. But the bad guys are probably going to get the most traction out of it, at least for the time being, because they're very hard. It's very hard to defend against this.
Sanjeev, what's your take on this? Because, at least in my experience with cybersecurity, a wag once told me, if you can imagine it, somebody's trying it. So this is it.
Yeah, I would go beyond that. And if you are thinking about it now, the criminals probably thought about it 3 weeks ago, right? Because that's all they think about, right? We are thinking about defending our infrastructure, defending our data. They're thinking about, where are the holes in the system, and now they can have agents doing it, thousands of agents doing it, running experiments, 24 hours a day. So I think we are entering, just like we're entering a sea change, a paradigm shift in how software development is done, how, infrastructure management is done, how AI ops is done. The same way how we're going to defend against these cyber criminals will also need to change. We need to not rely, a lot of the research recently, and you guys are more in depth in cybersecurity than I am, was going towards behavior, right? Or is this a typical behavior or abnormal behavior? Let's try to spot that. That won't work because, these agents do not mimic human behavior. They can be told not to mimic human behavior. They can be told to mimic, machine behavior and make it look like it's a perfectly legitimate process trying to, work its way around the system. So I think a new paradigm shift is definitely needed on how we're going to protect our systems against these attacks. And computers getting cheaper by the day, right? All those GPUs which are now being replaced by H100s and GB300s, all those GPUs are really cheap on the market, right? If you go to some of these GPU rental as a service companies, you can rent them for less than the cost of power because their value has already been recovered. How do we know they are not cyber criminals using those to deploy their agents at scale? So I think there's a lot to be thought through here.
Yeah, I mean, that's Ms. Cunningham also, was calling for this sort of shift toward behavioral analytics. So the models could infer, from the sequences of actions, not just a signature or an anomaly or whatever. I also, and maybe this harkens back to our other conversation and not having a lot of trust in government. Um, a lot of the security people that I talked to said, well, this is academia, business, and government need to collaborate. So what is collaboration? We've written a lot about that recently. What does collaboration look like under this administration? Because so much of the cyber stuff has been a bit decimated or taken apart and redistributed. I had a talk with the CEO of Bugcrowd yesterday. He was here in New York, and I met up with him, and we were talking about CISA. I mean, they've done a lot of work with CISA, and always thought they did really good things, but you can't really depend on that kind of collaboration as much anymore.
No, you were with Casey, Teri? Casey Ellis?
No, Dave Gary. So
okay, yeah, Casey's the founder. I don't know if he's still CEO.
I know. I talked to Casey quite a bit, but Dave was in town, and it was great to sit down with him.
So let me weigh in here from a cybersecurity perspective. I remember when fuzzing first came out, right? And the bad guys, fuzzing was great for security researchers. Fuzzing was great for AppSec teams. It allowed us to kind of just really put these apps through their paces before we released them, and even after we released them, to find bugs. Of course, the bad guys got a hold of fuzzing, and untold amounts of zero-day vulnerabilities were born via fuzzing. This is fuzzing to the umpteenth degree because it's using AI to basically take fuzzing and do more complex tasks, more complex attacks. So it's certainly a dangerous thing, and it's certainly wrought with money for the bad guys. But there's another angle here that we're not touching on. The AppSec industry is scared to death of this, because if developers and internal teams can run their own red team exercise without going to the Cobalts, the White Hats, and all of these companies that have hung their hat on coming in and doing a red team for you, who needs them, right? Who needs them? I was a black hat a couple weeks ago. I brought this very scenario up to one of the companies that are, crowdsourcing pen test, right? If my AI could do that pen test for me, right? And it's a nothing thing to set up, why do I need you?
But isn't that...
Go ahead, Sanjeev.
Yeah, isn't that that should be expected, right? I hope those companies aren't looking at, sitting around waiting for this to happen and are already figuring out what to do next. We saw this happen with data labeling, right? A few years ago, you had, sweatshops full of people around developing nations doing data labeling. Today, I don't need them. I can do data labeling, have my LLM do data labeling, right? So same way, I hope these companies are already figuring out how they can move from being the brute force red team to being the ones who architect a red team scenario and then have agents do it.
Well,
I think that's the path for them.
To me, it's like you could take a page out of Uber, right? So if you talk to people who were involved with Uber early on, the plan was always to get to autonomous vehicles and get rid of these drivers who take 30% of the revenue right off the top, right? If you have autonomous cars, I don't got to pay the driver. And so Uber was always, though they pivoted to using drivers, the plan was to have autonomous vehicles, and it's coming, right? Waymo and Tesla and everyone. It's the same thing with these pen test companies. Instead of paying pen testers, they could just push a button and have digital workers do the pen test, and people, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more profitable. Now, as I said, I had this conversation of Black Hat. That will work for 60, maybe 70% of your garden variety pen test. You're still going to need to call in, the Cracker Jack guy for that top 30%. The question is, how do you recognize who your top people are, and how do you keep them well fed when 60 to 70% of the work is being done by digital workers. But it's going to turn AppSec on its head.
So would also essentially turn the cost of launching a cyber attack is approaching near zero? I mean, we used to say we're going to disrupt the economic model for these guys. It looks like that's pretty much out the window.
They have crypto anyway. What difference it make?
All right. So Sanjeev, what's your best advice to folks then about this? Do I spin up my own DevSecOps team and start creating a subset red team, to Alan's point, or how do I proceed?
Again, that's again the build versus buy question, right? My philosophy, and if I'm talking to anybody, I was asking for this advice, I would always say, you got to decide what's adding to your IP, right? It's the classic phrase, I don't know who said it first, if you're a beer company, focus on what makes your beer taste better. So is it better for you to build your own red team, which knows your environment in and out, where your data is, where all the skeletons are buried? Or is it better to outsource that and focus your resources on building your own IP? I think it'll be a company by company decision to do that. What will happen is, as Alan said, those red teamers will get replaced by a very senior architect who can think very creatively, who's actually programming these agents to actually go execute the cyber attacks. That's what's going to happen instead of having an army, a sweatshop of people, or trying to brute force it. We'll get these very senior people who know how this works. They are the ones programming the agents and monitoring the agents and letting them the proverbial go to town on somebody's data. Whether they do it in-house or outside will depend upon what their core business is.
Teri, will this evolve into, my agents can beat up your agents because the security people will have agents, the bad guys will have agents, and they'll just battle it out till somebody cries uncle?
Yeah, well, and my money is almost always on the bad guys on this. Again, for the same reasons. This is what they do, and this is their whole sort of life is doing this stuff. And that's not the same for, defenders. So I don't mean to be, Miss Debbie Downer or whatever, but I also think in just listening to Sanjeev that there are going to be a lot of egos that get punctured.
Oh, there will be. Yeah. A lot of the, because some of the red team guys are the biggest, baddest cowboys in the West, right? And
yeah. It's like sending in wildcatters for the oil thing. Those guys cowboy around. So.
All right. Hey, let's take a break. We're going to come back for our C block here. The rise of the AI bots. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey guys, we're back, and there's a new report out from the folks at Fastly that's keeping track of the rise of AI bots. These are the things that LLMs are sending out to pull data from various websites, and boy, there's a lot more of them lately, and they come in two flavors. One's a crawler, which is used for training, and the other is a fetcher, which is used by, say, an AI agent to go pull some request that some end user actually made. Right now, there's a lot more crawlers than fetchers, but the fetchers are rising because we're going to see a lot more AI agents, and people who are running websites are getting, at least some of them, a little annoyed because, well, they got to throw more CPU and processing horsepower at all these AI agents that don't necessarily drive revenue for them. Alan, we run a couple of websites. I know you're familiar with the issue, but what's your take on what's going on here? Do we block the bots, or we just suck this up as the new cost of doing business?
Well, and Mike, you know this too as Chief Content Officer. We've had a bots problem at TechStrong for years, right? And the problem is separating, the good bots from the bad bots. right? If you want to be in Google search, you got to let the Google spider work, right? And it's the same thing when, they're estimating maybe 26% and rising quickly of searches today are being done on AI, ChatGPT, Claude, etc., are being done on AI versus on Google, though Google itself with Gemini, but 26% of search are AI search versus traditional Google search. Do you want to block the bots that may account for a quarter of all of your organic search traffic coming to you? None of us can afford that. But I think there's another issue here. You mentioned about the different kinds of bots. I don't mind them indexing, the bots that are going to index to make my stuff visible in a search. I do mind the bots that are sucking in the information so that they can train their LLMs on it in their never-ending quest to get more data to train bigger LLMs for the next version of their AI. If they're doing that, someone should pay me.
Mm-hmm.
That's my feeling.
All right. So is there going to be like how would that work? I don't think they can negotiate with every individual publisher. So should there be this kind of big kitty and everybody gets a cut, or
I think what you do is responsible AI companies have to identify the bot that is sucking data versus the spidering bot for search. And then by default, you shut down the sucking data bot until you pay a toll, and then you could let them have at it.
Right. Responsible AI company. Is that a new oxymoron I've never heard of?
You could wish, right?
Well, aren't there certain lawsuits going on right now between New York Times and OpenAI, I believe, and a couple of others where they are talking about, should there be a licensing deal?
Well, there have been several licensing deals with OpenAI. But of course, you do a deal with OpenAI. What about Anthropic? What about Gemini? What about, what's Elon's one?
XAI.
Grok AI.
Well, then the question arises, what about DeepSeek? What about all the ones which are, outside the realm of, U.S. copyright control also, right? I mean, again, it's going to be very difficult to manage and control unless we come up with some very strong law.
I only know one man who can solve this problem.
He's busy right now, though. Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm sorry. I think a little bit of a dim view of this as somebody who's been a writer all of her life, and have we ever gotten compensated, for being out there? No.
Yeah, and I think this has been a problem, Teri, right? I mean, our books get copyright violated. You can download PDFs of books right the day they come out. Movies have had this problem, right?
Right.
So I don't think the problem is new. It's just the scale at which it happens now because of bots.
The scale and the speed now for which it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think looking at the positive is going to be the bots who come in now, perform actions on your websites and buy content or acquire or pay for their things on behalf of other humans, right? And I think that you don't want to block those out also by worrying about the ones which are scraping for LLM data. So I think there's a choice that needs to be made to say, I still want my bots to come and subscribe to my webinar or register for my event or, make a travel booking, which is the proverbial example. It's like the hello world of the AI agents, right? Is can you make a travel booking? But, we are doing that. I'm doing that. I have the Comet browser from Perplexity and I ask it to go do things for me all the time, and it updates my calendar. It replies to emails.
Really? So I haven't got my hands on that yet, but is it good, Sanjeev?
It's excellent. I mean, it's the best $20 a month I spend. I can tell you on technology, right? Because it's when it's doing deep research, I ask it, send it a good query. It's going to go 30, 40 websites. It will go and research and tell you. Now it hallucinates, obviously, like every AI. So you have to be very good at setting the proper context and really reading and understanding what it's saying. But when it comes to doing activities, like I asked it to go find certain conferences, add it to my Google Calendar. I haven't asked it to buy me the tickets to the conferences yet, but it can. I think that age is coming where agents will actually do stuff for us. There, I think what content creators like us will also need to do is create a bot variant of interface, right? So it's not going to our traditional website and loading web pages, but we have our own agent which talks to that agent. And it's an agent
So
upon agent to agent
Well,
conversation.
A to A
Your
or
agent,
MPC.
my
or,
agent.
Yeah. You have your agent call my agent.
But wait, isn't there a big winner in all of this? Aren't we all going to need bigger servers? And I don't know, maybe Intel wins from all of this stuff.
Oh, there
Hey,
you
if
go.
Intel wins,
That might
we
be
all
that might be
win.
the end game of the White House. Yeah.
Right? We're in
Right.
like a profit sharing kind of thing maybe here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or maybe the government imposes, a little surcharge, and then it just goes into the kitty, and we're all contributing to the global economy.
I'm not
Think
going
of
to
it as
bite
their
Listen,
Michael.
kitty, do you think that kitty's going to go to our economy? Where's that kitty going to go?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't there an attempt back in the day to put a charge on every email being sent and all, right?
There was a thought about
was.
that from the internet providers and everything.
That's
Because look, nothing's free.
Nothing's free. I mean, at one point, I know what a significant portion of the entire world's internet traffic was Netflix, right? Netflix wasn't, revenue sharing with. Of course, they were paying for the bandwidth, but they were revenue sharing with all the internet providers. So I think there will be these scenarios where the companies that are being hit the most might not be the ones that profit later on from them, but the infrastructure's got to be built, right? I mean, somebody's got to pay for it, and a new internet will, so to speak, will come up where it's these bots interacting with bots and doing stuff for us. I mean, that's the vision. That's the whole vision of where we want to be.
In the immortal words of Michael Corleone, someone's got to answer for Santino, Carlos. All right. On that note, we're gonna pull the cord on this, gang. It's been rip-roaring, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We've got a full Tech Strong TV lineup immediately following on this beautiful Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow for our Friday weekly wrap-up, gang story. We've got some interesting things to talk about, including CISO payola. It's something I really want to talk about. We'll talk about it then. But until then, on behalf of Mike, Sanjeev, John, and Teri, enjoy everyone. We're out of here.